Great, thanks, Ed. Oh, picture of me, get rid of that quickly. Right. I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about making the transition, which is probably quite a narrow topic compared to what I normally talk about. Ed was very specific when he told me last night. He said he got 25 minutes, stick on brief. Because if we were talking in Wales on Friday, and we had an hour, we spent 2.5 hours in a hole. Weirdly, everyone around that hole was still interested at the end of 2.5 hours. Because soil is hopefully what I'll do to you in the next 25 minutes, make you really excited about soil, understanding how it works, and why it's really, really important to understand it to enable you to make the transition down this route. So at the start, we need to really understand what you want to do. And most people have ideas of where they want to get to, which is brilliant, but unless you know where you're starting from, you don't know which direction to go in, what to do first, what needs to be addressed. The starting point enables you to make an action plan. If we don't make an action plan, we're never, ever going to succeed. And fundamentally, what we cannot do is fall into the trap Ed touched on earlier, trying to do everything at once. That happened, I think it was in the 80s. I was around, but we're not that involved in it. But we all dived into direct drilling. We dived in for 4 or 5 years, and we dived back out again. It didn't work because we were really narrow in our view of what we were trying to do. We also mustn't keep jumping with trends. It's the one thing, again, Ed spoke about it, every magazine you read is about regen, do this, do that, and there's a new product, there's a new this is the only thing that will work. It's not true. There's no one silver bullet. And the reason why there's no one silver bullet is because you're all farming different aspirations. You're all farming different soils. You've got different skill sets. I can go on and on and on. There's lots of differences about you, which is a good thing. But it means that it makes it harder because you need to understand an awful lot more about your soil rather than just reading the magazine, oh, I got a blue drill, it worked for me. It probably won't on everyone's farm. The way we really have to talk about it is we have to talk about baselining. And that's what I'm going to spend the next wee while talking about. However, I think one of the key parts is every journey you do starts with one small step. And the biggest step I've seen on farm over the last 10, 15 years is not about machines, it's not about anything, it's about the noodle. It's a headspace movement. And that's really important, looking at things differently, questioning why do I do that? Why have we always done this? Sitting around the table with granddad, dad, and son or daughter and talking about what did granddad do? Well, that was quite good, then dad changed it and now we're going to change it back or do something differently. Don't keep doing the same old, same old. So when we talk about baselining, you need to baseline all aspects of the farm. I'm going to stick to soil and knowledge. So all aspects of the farm could be financial, biodiversity, all those elements. But fundamentally, my area of expertise is soil and soil knowledge. So that's where we're going to focus on. And if you look at soils, it's quite old, this diagram. Soils have 3 pillars: physics, chemistry, and biology. They all work together. You cannot separate them. But as an industry, we've been really, really clever at separating them. We've been focusing on physics and chemistry because they're easy. Really easy. The field is green, I plow it, it goes brown, I can see what I've done. The field is green, I put glyphosate on it, it goes brown, it's easy, job done. Biology is the missing one. Biology is very much at the forefront at the moment. But biology, the reason I think we've not done a lot with biology is because it's very difficult to see. And I'll touch on that later on. Biology is very small. Testing for biology was very, very expensive. So we didn't do an awful lot of it. Testing for physics and chemistry is quite straightforward. So if you think about it, which is the most important one? No. Most people will say biology, hopefully. Or they will do by the end of this. Most people say physics or chemistry. But actually, we'll have a raise of hands. How many people in this room are biological farmers? Raise your hand. Wow. Anyone here growing a plant? Raise your hand. Anyone here growing an animal? Is that a biological process? It is, isn't it? So you're all biological farmers. However, biological farming has got a very bad rap because biology is weird. You wear sandals, you smoke reefer, you've got a beard. That's quite trendy now, apparently, having beards. It's fundamental to everything we do, but we've kind of forgotten it. And if you take nothing away from today, think biology. Physics and chemistry, I'll explain in a minute, are really, really, really crucial because they allow you to have good biology. But don't for a moment think you don't need biology, because you do. You're growing biology. Same slide. And one of the key parts, you see it more and more now, microbes started having an association, or biology started having an association with plants 500 million years ago. What is the dawn of modern age agriculture? 10,000 years? So plants and microbes have been doing R&D for thick end of 600 million years. We've been doing R&D for 10,000. Who's got it right? Let's build the house. Chemicals. Ooh, it's not turned up yet. Chemicals is a really, really focused point that I'm going to spend a lot of time on, because if we understand the chemistry, it alludes to the physics, which in turn will allude to the biology. Because biology is ubiquitous, it's everywhere. You take a bit of cheese out of the fridge, you leave it on your sterilized counter. Within 3 days, it's got mold on it. Soils are teeming with life. We just have to get the house right for them. So we'll talk about the chemical side of things. Those that know me, I spend a lot of time in holes looking at the physics, but that physics is usually backed up by doing very detailed gold soil tests. And some of the elements that we measure on the gold soil test are unadulterated pure chemistry. Things like pH and buffer pH. There's a difference. pH, your water pHs will change during the growing season. Wet, dry, massive plant growing will push lots of root exudates, acids into soil, and it will lower the pH. The buffer pH, however, is the resting pH of your soil. If you do not know that measure, then you do not know what your soil pH really wants to be. And you have to know that measure, because if you've got a very high buffer pH, then an awful lot of your chemicals that you're using, fertilizers, etc., will not perform anything like as well as they will do if you've got a lower buffer pH of, say, 6.5. And at that point, we probably won't change our buffer pH, but what we are now doing is managing it. And this comes back to the baseline. Understand what you've got to then make sure you manage the inputs you're putting on there. Influence it. Cation exchange capacity, much talked about. Really, really important part. The way I kind of describe it is, how big is your soil? How many fingers have you got? How many hooks can your soil hold on to nutrition with? If you've got a soil that's only got 5 hooks, a very low cation exchange capacity, you've got to think it's a skinny soil. It needs feeding little and often. So don't try and think you're going to put a whole 3 years' worth of nutrition on and expect it to perform. You've got to feed it little and often. Conversely, you get a very big cation exchange capacity of 50. That 50's got 50 fingers. You can apply more nutrition. You've got a bigger reserve, more forgiving. So again, these numbers are what you should be measuring when we start looking at soils. Bulk density and soil texture. Bulk density is the weight of a cubic meter of soil. When that cubic meter gets too dense, roots will not penetrate it. There will not be the air in there for microbial activity. Water retention. So we can do as much physics as we want, but if the soil is collapsing to be a high bulk density, you'll make physics into it, you'll bring it up, you'll bring it down. And in doing that, you're burning diesel for no gain. So understand what we've got, and then we make plans to it. Exactly the same way with soil texture, sand, silt, clay. Does your soil want to be a lovely, fluffy chocolate cake? Or a big, fat, thick brownie? We want chocolate cake. Fluffy chocolate cake. Air, water, soil particles. And that can be influenced by our management structure, for the better or the worse. Excessive cultivation will probably increase our bulk density, collapse the soil. Make it a worse environment for our microbes and our plant roots. Organic matter. Very emotive topic, this. Everyone loves organic matter. Lots of different measures of organic matter. When we look at the baselining we've done, and Harry will probably touch on it, we've measured all the different pools of organic matter in your soil. We're all familiar with the different pools. Organic matter isn't just organic matter. We've got lost by ignition organic matter, bits like a root or a bit of straw that you can see. You've then got your do-mass carbon, which is a different extraction method, which is measuring some smaller parts of carbon in that soil. They will not be the same result. You've got active carbon, which is a reaction with potassium permanganate. It makes your soil, measures the part of your carbon that's cycling. That's really good news, because you want the organic matter to break down and feed your soil copper, zinc, boron, nitrogen, potassium. And then you've got the carbon to clay layer, which tells us how well your soil is performing in holding organic matter, cycling it, or constipated, too much carbon. And that then links into the carbon to nitrogen ratio, which is a massive topic about what we want to be doing with maybe cover crops, chopping straw, organic inputs. Balancing our carbon to nitrogen ratio to allow the whole functionality of soils, all measured in what we're doing. Let's put it again. Oh, they're all there. We then, crucially, we're all trying to grow crops, whether that's grass, livestock, trees, whatever. Every crop that you're growing needs to extract nutrition to grow itself. When we talk about this, and it's a really important part, it's not about what you remove from the field. So if you imagine a crop of wheat grows to 60 centimeters tall, we remove the ear, 10 ton. Or if you're Harry, was it 12 ton this year? 12 ton a wheat, off it goes. That's what you remove. But think of the architecture, the plant, the root, the stem. It had to grow to get to that ear. You probably removed, let's say, 120 kilos of potassium. But in the architecture, it took 500 kilos of potassium to allow you to remove that 120. When we look at the baselining, we are looking at the extractable, easily plant-available nutrition in kilos per hectare, so we can make the right decisions. Have I got enough? Don't set your stall out, Harry, at 12 ton when you know you've only got the nutrition in your bag to get 8 ton. Just efficient farming, understanding what you've got, baselining. It enables you to see what the potential limiting factors are. And if you take the potassium example, in the top 15 centimeters, you've got 200 kilos of potassium. I want to grow a 12-ton crop of wheat. I need 500. What am I going to do? Well, that's what Ben and Harry and Ed and Joel will probably talk about later on. There's lots of things you can do. The worst thing you can do, in my view, is go and buy it. Go and put the moron principle. Get more nutrition on. What can we do? Should we be cycling more? Is there more in the soil profile? Is there interactions that's stopping it becoming available? And again, that's this is the whole point of the benchmarking, understanding what we've got to make it work. Then we've got to remember we have a soil that's not just got available nutrition, it's got nutrients in it that are complexed. That could be like people, they could be sleeping. Massive workforce, but they're asleep. We need to try and look at it and say, well, why are they in the totals and why aren't they available? What is causing it? Is it a chemical problem, a physical problem, or a biological problem? If it's chemical, we all know that because of what we're measuring. And in there, we may have a huge amount of nutrition. And the analogy that we tend to use is that if we take our readily available nutrients, they're like your fridge in your kitchen. You sit at the kitchen table, it's really easy, you stretch over, you get some food, and you eat it. Readily available, easy access. Most farms I go on to have a massive chest freezer somewhere. And that chest freezer is full of food. Still got the same analysis, but it's in a frozen form. We can't eat it. It has to go through a process before we eat it. And if we measure it, we know what we've got in the fridge. You've got huge amounts of phosphorus, or say, or potassium. What is stopping that becoming available for us? And if you take the food analogy a step further, we might need to put it through a microwave or an Arga, gas cooker, I don't really care. But we've got to do a process for it. So if you take that into agriculture, that could mean it could be a cultivation issue. It could be a pH issue, a chemical issue. It could be a biological issue that will allow those nutrients to cycle for you. But unless we measure how big our deep freeze is, you will always revert to available nutrients. Oh, I haven't got enough, I put more on. Let's measure what we've got totally and what can we do to make it work, which again is more back to Harry and Ben and what they're doing on their soils later. To give you an example, this is a soil here. The readily available pool, your fridge, has got 85 kilos of phosphate in it. The deep freeze has got 1,228 kilos of phosphate. Now I know, you don't know this, but I know the reason why you've not got a huge amount of cycling is because it's a wet, biologically inert soil. So there's absolutely no point, in my view, of going out there and saying, I've got slightly low phosphate, I'm going to apply more phosphate. What I want to do is try and figure out, can I make a difference to the wetness? Can I change the structure? Now, the structure and the wetness could be a compaction pan, compaction layer, in which case we take it out physically. I love ploughing. Never thought you'd hear you say that, did you? I love ploughing. I hate ploughing. I love min-till, I hate min-till. It's all irrelevant. It really is. It's totally not irrelevant. The machine is irrelevant. It's what you do with it and does the soil want it. Does it need it? If you go to a direct drill farm, the soil is rock hard. Yeah, I'm a direct driller, I'm not ploughing. Why? Your soil needs air. It needs to be opened up. Do it. Don't get stuck on being one thing or the other. Be broad church. Love everybody. That's what this is about. Maybe not. But again, think about everything that's going on. And most of what's going on in our soils we cannot see with our naked eye. Soil structure, brilliant thing. Brilliant. Everyone thinks it starts with a clod the size of your head. It doesn't. Structure starts at 0.003 millimeters. Smaller than the hair on your head. A bit like biology, tiny stuff going on. Why does it start at that level? Again, this is why we measure it. We measure the clay, sand, silt fraction. We measure the humus fraction. We understand what's happening at this level. And what you've got is you've got tiny bits of clay, sand, and silt, and they are either held apart or pushed apart or squeezed together, made to create wee homes for a bit of water, a bit of humus, microbes then build, and then a little bit of root goes through there, a bit of fungi goes through there and builds it a bit bigger. Then we get to 0.3 mil, and you've got a bit of root hair coming in there, and then, we get an aggregate at 3 mil. 3 mil is still tiny. So when we measure the gold soil test and when we're baselining, we're understanding not why, or potentially understand why we've got a massive great big clod the size of my head in the field, because it started here. I've got a high clay content with no organic matter, full of magnesium, pulling the soil tight together. High clay content, no organic matter, massively high in sodium and potassium, destructuring my soil. So do not, at that point, think you're going to do it all with physics. You need to do chemistry. Chemistry will allow you to do the physics that will allow you to do the biology. It may sound I'm talking stuff that's really, really complicated, but that's our role to explain it on farm, Ed's role, my role, people's role, to make it easier on farm. So we've done the chemistry. That's nice and easy. Biology. Biology is, again, really interesting. Some of the biological tests people do is just count worms. Anyone here counted worms recently? You're a racy bunch, you lot. Right. If we count worms, how many worms are good? Anyone? Higher than average. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I would go that. One is better than none. Who are you benchmarking yourself against? It doesn't make sense. Oh, you must have 12 worms. Why? Why do you have to have 12 worms? I don't know. So that's why when we do the baselining, we are going out there and we're doing the physical part, but I'll come to that in a second. You can go and count worms. You can do things called the PLFA, phospholipid fatty acid test, soil life monitor. That measures the microbial activity in your soil. Bacteria, fungi, and your protozoas, the early parts of the food chain. Now that tells me how well nutrition is cycling, how well your biological profile is happening. Massive so what? So what? That's what the report looks like. So what? Well, the big so what is, if I'm doing everything right, my biology will change, and this is a measure for you to show you that it is changing. But I don't create loads of recommendations on the back of doing this. It's nice to know where you start from and what you do to change it. And the reason I don't do a lot with this, other than test it to find where we are, is because the physics and the chemistry really, really affect this. People keep saying, well, I want really, really fungal-dominated soils. Okay, but you're running a pH of 8. That's bacterial-dominated. What are you going to do? It all becomes down to the root zone at that point, rather than thinking we're going to change the whole soil. So really useful things. We tend to measure at the beginning, and then when we do trials or make changes, and you will see a change. If you're seeing a physical and chemical change, pretty confident you'll see a biological change for the benefit. When it comes to physics, the bit we spend a lot of time doing, this is the really exciting part. This is with a spade in the field, walking around, digging holes. We go and look in the field. It rolls on to another part. Where do we take our tests from? Where do we go and dig a hole in the field? The old days of walking to the field and walking a W across it, saying, I'll dig here, 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 and here. Now, there's lots of really, really good stuff on farm. Most of what we've got on farm is you guys' knowledge. Grandad said, oh, yeah, it used to be 2 fields. Well, that's a really wet hole. Or this, use that knowledge. And/or we've got a thing called TerraMap. Brilliant bit of kit. You tell exactly where your soil types are and change. And at that point, we can be a lot more prescriptive in what we're doing on farm because we know where the soils are different and understand why they're different, and then try and, if possible, make them a bit more even. And then if you're doing that, we've got a really good digital platform that makes my life a lot easier, because the old days, I used to run around with bits of Excel spreadsheet papers going, oh, I do this, and it's like, well, which part of the field was that? Oh, I can't remember. Now, there's a thing called, well, it's been around for a while, Omnia. You take all the best soil knowledge, you put in a digital platform for yourselves. Make life easy. When we do the soil assessment, the visual soil assessment, you smell it. Anyone here smelt soil recently? Brilliant. A few more than worm-counted worms. That's good. Just be careful smelling soil. If it's a really nasty-looking soil, don't smell it. I ended up getting a fungal disease in my nose for a month, and it wasn't very nice. So you can look at it and go, that's grey and nasty. Don't smell it. Just walk away. Signs of compaction. Are you seeing layers, like wet layers, and then it becomes dry? Very obvious. How deep is that compaction? Above ground indicators. You can see it with plant health or plant crops, etc. The bit I stuck in, I've done a client yesterday, and he put this thing up yesterday, which I thought was really interesting. The AHDB in 2018 found that 10% of land that was deep cultivated did not have a deep pan. Because we all talk about recreational cultivation, don't we? It's like a buzzword. We beat ourselves up with it. However, what they also found, 40% of land that did have a deep pan wasn't cultivated. So we weren't recreational, or some were recreational cultivating. A lot of people needed to be doing more work. Which I thought was really interesting, because always people think the other way around, we're doing too much. If you go back to what I said earlier, love the plough, hate the plough, doesn't matter. If you've got a problem, take it out with physics. And then put a biological route into it. There's some really good guides out there if you are doing it yourselves, and this is part of the SFI. Really, well, anyone doing SFI? Brilliant, I think you should all do it. Really, really brilliant way of being paid to look at your soil, enhance your soil knowledge. You're being paid to do it. Talk to us later, we can help with that. So we've done all this, we've done all the baselining, and it's kind of, so what? Why did I do that? The baselining allows us to make decisions on every single farming thing you do on your farm. Can I direct drill? Have I earned the right to direct drill? Have I told my soil I'm going to direct drill? Is my soil ready for it? Do I want to buy a biological inoculant? I don't know. I do now because I know what my biology is doing in the soil. What rotation should I be doing? What's my C/N ratio? What's my sand, silt, clay fraction? What type of root do I want in my soil? We know all that because we've baselined it. Catch crop, cover crops, soil and crop nutrition strategy. Links into macronutrients, magnesium's one of them, to micronutrients. What's the difference between a macro and a micro? They're all essential, aren't they? Just a numbers game. Go back to kilos or grams per hectare. Machinery requirement, that's the bit everyone really loves because it's so easy. But actually, yeah, it's important. But the more we know about the soil, the less important that becomes, in my view. And then incorporate livestock, manures, waste streams, things like gypsum, compost, farmyard manures. If we can't import farmyard manures, why don't we grow our own catch crop cover crops? If you are growing a catch crop cover crop, we have a thing called the cover crop evaluation sheet, which tells you how many kilos of nitrogen, phosphorus, all the elements you have per hectare in your cover crop. So you can then make an educated decision on how you're going to destroy that cover crop and how much nutrition is going to come at your next crop. Just measuring things to make our lives easier. So when we look at the baseline, that baseline will lead to all these elements. If we don't baseline, then we might as well just go and guess. And if we're guessing, we will not fundamentally be economically right. Because I think everyone in this room is about making money, isn't it? I think, yep, good, glad to agree. We have to, if we get it all right, we will make more money. If we get it all right, and Ed talked about, we won't be having an agroecology conference, it'll be a normal conference, standard conference talking about this. If we get it all right, we will be absorbing more carbon into the soil. We will be being more efficient, so less petrochemical use. That's good for the climate. It's good for us. It's efficiencies, that's all it is. And once we started the journey, we've made a plan, we know what we want to do, we want to monitor our progress. And in monitoring our progress, you look at plant health, sap tissue testing. And we look at plant tissue nutrient availability, kilos per hectare. How are our soils cycling? So we go back and review it. Are the organic manures working for us? We can look at grain analysis at the end, link it to everything we went around there, and show that, yes, we are seeing a bigger efficiency of all our applied nutrients. At that point, you raise your right hand, you pat yourself on the back, and you move on. But financially, you'll probably be better off as well. Write a report. I don't know if Eddie, you're going to touch on that, or Harry's going to write it. Lots of times we get, again, go back to starting the journey, get really excited, have a lovely day talking about it, and then go home. Brilliant. We need to write a plan and write a report. Write it down. Get your own team's buy-in, whether that's operators, shepherds that come in to graze at cover crops. Make everyone in your team understand what you're trying to do. So much easier if you've got that written down, showing the timelines of what we want to be doing. Take action on all aspects of the farming. Don't just think I'm going to go direct drilling or change my cultivation. We want to change everything in a plan, not overnight. So in summary, the key part is we need to understand where you want to get to. I think it's one of the most important parts. You need to baseline your existing operation. And again, there's lots of other bits of biodiversity and all that. The bit I've talked about is soils. Involve us. We've got a healthy soils team here, myself and Rebecca. We've got the agroecology team, Ed. There's people that can help. And as Ed said before, it's not about turning up with wonderful products and solutions. It's about understanding your business and linking it to your soil. Being real about it rather than going, oh yeah, let's jump to this, jump to this, jump to this. Create an action plan with your team. And in that, it's again a bit unfair, but be brutal. Highlight the shortcomings of your team. What are we missing in our team? What knowledge can we bring in? Don't be afraid of bringing other people onto the farm to help you. It's that openness I think is really, really, really important again, about being real with what we want to do. And then ultimately be really realistic about the speed of change. Don't think we're going to get there really, really quickly. You might do, but think your speed of change. What are you comfortable with? And then really important part is please don't jump from trend to trend. Kind of make the plan and don't just keep hopping. Stick with it. Manage finances and changes over a 8 to 10 year rotation. I get really annoyed with, oh, yeah, that didn't work in 1 year. It cost me more money. Think about the bigger picture. Farming isn't about 1 year on year. Okay, it's difficult as your FBT, short term, but long term we should be thinking of it over a longer period of time. And fundamentally, get started.